Hey, what is up? I am so thrilled to be here with a very, very special guest, Alisa Divine. She has just written a book called She Wins, hashtag She Wins. She's also the author of Killing Kate and has just earned herself a couple of recognition awards through Next Generation Indie. And she's also a co-owner of a publishing house called Personal Power Press. And I was just, I saw your story, Alisa, and I've been following you for a little while on social media, and I was like, I have to reach out. I have to dig into this deeper because I know, number one, it takes so much courage to get out of a relationship of domestic abuse, but also it takes a lot of courage to tell your story and be open and honest about it. So I would just love to have a conversation with you and hear a little bit about you and where this came from and now a little bit about your book and kind of go from there. How does that sound?
That's perfect. Thanks
Cool.
for today and invite. I'm glad that you reached out to me on Facebook.
Well, I see people all the time, and this is the coolest thing about social media is that you can connect with people all over the world. They don't need to be in your social circle. They don't even need to be in your country, and you can connect with them. And I think sharing other people's stories or the things that they've overcome, we find our strength in adversity, but we also find our strength in others that have gone before us. And so I'm thrilled that you were willing to hop on today and tell your story.
Yes, I'm honored to. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, yes. So, I will start from what you mentioned that I was, in an abusive relationship that lasted for a long time. And, for like 18 years or so, something like that. And
Wow.
I had left several times, throughout that process. And then I was sucked back in, that things were going to be different and change and so on. And finally, I had just made the decision to leave. It was not an easy decision. The first time that I left, I think we had only been married for a year at that time.
Wow.
A long time. And plus, I will say, because I think this is really important, that when I entered in the relationship, I was 16. So actually, we know that by the statistics, from the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, that young women between the ages of 16 and 24 are the most at risk for being in an abusive relationship. So, I didn't know the warning signs. Like, I definitely knew things were not right, but I thought that it was going to change. I thought he could change. And I tried to make it work, a lot for a long time.
Yeah,
And
18 years is a long time to go through that like torment and turmoil.
yes, and plus we had kids together too. And I know that, that is a hard thing for women to do because they oftentimes so much guilt that, they're the ones, if they make the decision to leave, that they could be affecting their children or, there's the guilt factor of kind of, breaking the family apart. And then, that was a lot that I had to overcome, and it didn't happen right away. But eventually it did. And, the things that I learned in the process, I was then able to, teach my kids that. And I
Yeah.
think that that the only thing that I would have done differently was have done it. I would have left sooner.
Yeah. I think that that's a common occurrence, because you like I was in one of those relationships for a year and it drove me crazy for a year, so I can't even relate to you on 18 years with children. But and I know that you can probably relate to this because you said, you broke it off and then you got pulled back in. They're master manipulators. And
Right.
I remember my ex saying to me once, and he said, I knew I had you if you text me back. It didn't matter what you text me. It didn't matter how much you disliked me or how upset you were or how angry you were. I knew as soon as you text me back that I could reel you back in. And as soon
Mm,
as he said that to me, because what I want people to understand is that it makes sense to me that from 16 to 24 is the biggest risk, because
Right.
your confidence level, who you are, who you become, right, isn't quite there yet and isn't quite formed. And you are still learning, what am I worthy of? Who do I deserve to be with? So you question everything. But I see that now looking back, and the manipulation that went through it. And I fell less in love with myself over that process. Like, you start to believe the things that they tell you.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. That is definitely. There were a lot of situations like that that I experienced, and definitely like through the years that I like learning about who I am as a woman, and like you mentioned, and there were so many like things like stories that I held in my mind that I had to reprogram, after I left. So that is a very that's something that we want to teach young girls, the warning signs of what to watch out for, what to know, and to be able to talk to other people and get help, and ask for advice and mentors that way. So when I did leave, I had started a photography business. And so I knew that I wanted to work with women specifically and empower women. That was, the way that I felt that I was going. And, it's interesting how like when you get on a path and then you start to like intuitively find, where your place is, and things start to shift. And so I had been in my photography business for a few years, maybe it was several years. I've lost track by now. And then I had the idea, like some people had crossed my path, and I had this idea about doing a book that featured women who overcame abuse by telling their story, but then also showing photographs of them. So I was kind of mixing, my photography business with also writing, and which is something that I had done for years before that, but I never considered myself to be a writer. I never thought that there was a place for me in writing. And so when I started doing that, I was asked to join the publishing company. And so I just felt like, that was my next progression. And I moved on from my photography studio. I don't do that anymore. And so doing that book, #SheWins, just kind of opened my world to more writing. And I really felt like that was my place, that was my calling, where I could make the most difference. And so doing that led also to then the next book, which was Kate. And that has led to another book called Rise Above, which I've been really quiet about. And I'm actually working on that this week. I'm in a cabin up north.
In the mountains.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so, yes, I do writing, I do the publishing company, and I also do coaching along the lines of, empowering women and overcoming and healthy relationships, building confidence, everything that I learned, my experiences to overcome and then to help other women. That's what, that's where my passion is, because when I thought about writing the book, #SheWins, my thought was, I didn't even know that it was going to be a book. I just thought if I could help, at least one other woman be able to tell her story, and that was my experience. I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment, and like looking back on that now, I don't. But I remember what that felt like, and I remember my thought processes, and I've shifted so much of that. But I just remember thinking, like, if I could just help other women, and and so here I am.
I think that's really incredible because, it does take a lot of courage to tell your story. It takes a lot of courage to get it out there in the world, but it's other people seeing women like you that have turned the corner. They've gotten their kids out of a bad situation. They've continued on to do big things in their life and make an impact. And like, they're probably in that place that they're feeling very small and defeated. When you're in the thick of a relationship like that, you forget who you are sometimes, and you're on survival mode. You're on survival mode. That's what happens, right? But when you said that, I wish that I had left sooner. When you did leave, what did you see happen with your kids? Right? Because we don't realize, my parents waited until we were adults to divorce. They probably should have divorced 6 years prior, right?
Right.
And so, as adults, we reflect on that and like, oh, that all makes sense now. So when your kids, did you see their behavior change? Did you see things like happen in their lives that progressed in a positive manner?
Well, definitely, and it's an interesting situation because I have quite an age range of kids. So, like my oldest was in high school and my youngest was in diapers. So, like
Wow.
shit, but what they do know, obviously there's a lot of different ways that this can happen, because oftentimes with abusive relationships, when there are children involved, the children are used in the, okay. And so that can become very sticky. It can become very difficult on a lot of different levels. And so that was my experience, I will say. And so what my kids have learned, the number one thing that they have learned is seeing me become empowered, seeing me
Yes.
up for
Yes.
seeing me teach them, how to speak up, how to say if something bothers them, how to be articulate in the way that they ask for things, in the way that they talk to men, and I think it's just a different culture nowadays that we need to be able to teach, our kids how to communicate effectively and how to draw boundaries and stand up for themselves. So that's what
Absolutely.
I learned out of that. They've watched me become,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Well, and the thing is, and I won't say the problem, but the reason so many people stay is for the kids. But what if the kids were the reason you should leave? What if the
ex-
kids, right? Like, you're the example for your kids. They don't listen to everything that you say, but they are watching you and you're their example. So shouldn't that be the reason that you leave?
exactly. Yes. And actually that was one of my reasons where I finally did, pull the plug on that. And I think that, it's, we can use that as an excuse that we should stay because of the kids. And sometimes that is the easier choice. Sometimes it is the harder choice to leave. And you have to think about what kind of example do you want for your kids? Because they are going to sometimes either repeat what they know. So if they're used to seeing someone, being abused, whether it is mentally, physically, verbally, I don't know what, the kids may see if it's sexually or financially, they may repeat that because that's what they know.
Yeah.
So, they also may say, I don't want anything like that, so it can go a couple different ways, but for me, like I didn't feel like I was living in integrity with myself by being in something that I knew that was not healthy for me because I couldn't be the best mom that I wanted to be when I was feeling so terrible about myself because I didn't have control over my life or I didn't have freedom to do things that I wanted to do. So I think, just for that reason alone, I couldn't be the best mom anymore.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's really hard. And like I always talk to moms and say, look, like we all feel like we got to put our kids first, but you actually have to come first because if you're happy and you're living with purpose and you feel well-rounded, then that's what your kids are going to get from you, right?
Oh,
Like,
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I think that is so important because that is kind of the belief. And I don't know if it's just for like younger moms or if it's for a lot of moms, but they sometimes they do think and do. And, and that's why I stayed that long because I did feel like, it was most important for my kids. I did feel like, that was the best thing for them. But you're right. We have to put ourselves first, metaphor that was used on Oprah. I don't know where else it was used, but that's where I remember seeing it or hearing about it, where you want to put the oxygen mask on yourself first, like
that's
if you're
right.
or you put it on anyone else because you can't help someone else if you're not taking care of first. So it's important to think about, and that's something that I've changed pretty drastically in my life. I take care of myself first. I start my mornings doing the things that fill my cup and that set me up for success, because if I don't do that, I'm really not very good to anyone else.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a very, very good lesson. And I think it's one that you step into sometimes out of necessity. But if we can teach our kids that, if we can show them that and teach our kids that, how important it is. So that's kind of maybe something that I'd love to talk about is, if getting your message out to young girls and young women on the signs to look for in a abusive relationship, are there things that early warning signs that may occur in that relationship that you're like, something isn't rubbing me right, but this is what we do. They'll change, they'll get better, right? We fall in love with the idea of that person and who they can become, and not the person that they are. And a very valuable lesson that my mom taught me and my dad both, actually, they said, the little things that you don't like about somebody, they will only grow as you get older. So if you can't live with those little things that drive you crazy or that don't sit well with you, then you should move on because they're not going to get better. I mean, people change. I believe that people can change, right? But going into a relationship, knowing that and expecting that, okay, this is something can I live with it? Is this something that I can live with? And instead of, they'll get better, this will go away, right? So would you be able to kind of talk about a few things like that people could maybe recognize early on in a relationship
Yeah,
that might point to them getting into trouble later on?
yeah, definitely. And this is fresh in my mind because I'm working on this rough draft right now that I am doing with Kayla, and she is 21 right now, and she was in an abusive relationship a few years ago,
Mm.
and she was severely attacked. And so a lot of the things that we're going over, for the rough draft, started when she was 18. So I think sometimes too, and I want to say this first, that sometimes, young women that age or teenage girls, they often put so much importance on, a romantic relationship, right? And like the main priority should be themselves, really. It
Yes.
should be doing what they're focusing on for their future, their friends, taking care of themselves and being the best that they can be. And oftentimes we see that girls put so much importance on having a romantic relationship, that is some kind of status maybe, or they're looking for love in the wrong place, right? They should start with themselves, and they're looking for it in someone else. um but what I want to say that is relevant, with Kayla's story, also relevant, and then I'll get into mine, but I think that Kate, with Kayla, there was a lot of possessiveness, as far as having to know where she was all the time or who she was talking with, or jealousy. She couldn't, be with any other boys or any other friends, or even, it was all about him.
Right.
That, that to me tells me that he's very insecure. It has that kind of jealousy and like kind of possessiveness,
Yeah.
and that is a big red flag. And then also, just like constant communication and texting and having to know, where they are all the time. I experienced those same signs, with the jealousy and the control, and also, maybe even controlling what she wears, whether she doesn't wear anything that's, revealing, or that is looks a certain way that he might, feel insecure because of, that is, it matter what if she chooses what she wants to wear. She can wear whatever she wants. It's not up to him.
Yeah.
You know, um, that is a big piece. And also, verbally, what they're saying. Is it offensive? Is it derogatory to women? Is he putting her down? Is, he calling her names? And, and the physical pieces are, sometimes easier to identify because, like I was in high school in, the early 90s. I knew that, if a boy hit you, or called you names, then that was abusive. But it was underlying emotional pieces,
Yes.
and the underlying manipulation that is more difficult to identify, because oftentimes, and I will say this from Kayla's story, there were times where he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm not going to do that again." And I heard that too. I'm going to change. Like, they often want to be good people.
Right. They just can't help their behavior, and they go in a vicious cycle, and it just becomes, and often and I might be wrong in this, it's generational.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. And I don't know, because I don't, I mean, it's hard to maybe track back,
Right.
like the other generations, but it's learned. It's learned, I
It's
will
their
say.
behavior. Yeah, it's really interesting. And that's something that I went through in high school, dating the guy that everybody wanted to date. And it didn't start out physically abusive.
Mhm.
And he'd use words and he'd make fun of me, right? Like it'd be, I'm just playing, I'm just playing. But I would end up in tears
Oh,
4 to 5 times we hang out.
right.
And my mom's like, why do you keep hanging out? Why are you keep dating this guy if all you do is cry all the time because he's harassing you?
Yes.
And that's what breaks you down. I'm just joking though, right? Oh, I'm just joking. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way. But over time, that weighs on you and it digs into you, and you lose confidence and you start feeling bad about yourself.
Yeah, that is a great point. And, that's not a joke. If it doesn't feel good, it's not a joke, but that is often used as a cover up to, like to pretend that it doesn't mean anything. But if someone repeats that, it's not a joke. Okay. If
No.
it does not feel good to you, then take that, you know, go by your feelings. Okay. So, oftentimes we need to look at people's actions, and use that as, our determination of whether this is a good relationship or not, by their actions, not by their words. Because a lot of times we can look at situations that are abusive and their words do not match their actions. Okay, they
Yeah.
may say joking, or come on, you're being too sensitive, or I'm going to be better next time, I'm not going to do that again. But then the
Right.
actions to that, so that's what we want to look at is are the actions following the words? Because if they're not, there's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so many people, you give people the benefit of the doubt and you care about them and you love them. But if you can't put yourself first in that situation. I remember leaving that 1 year relationship that was horrible the whole time, like just awful. And I remember leaving his house and saying, I hate who I am when I'm with you because he made me crazy. And I recognized that I wasn't behaving the way that I wanted to. I was feeling bad about myself, and I wasn't happy. And then what was crazy that happened, and I don't know if this happened to you, but when I left, I was angry. I was so angry at him. And what I
Mhm.
recognized after a few years of therapy was that I could control that situation. I stayed. And so who I was really mad at was myself,
Yeah.
because often they can't change this behavior and they can't recognize it and they can't do anything about it. And so you have to be the one. They're not going to leave you. They're not
Right.
going to be the one that leaves you.
That really never happens. Not that in my experience, not in the women that I've worked with or talked to. In fact, oftentimes the ones who were abusive were the ones who did not want to end the relationship, or they, prevented it in every measure that they could take.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, another really important point to think about it is if anyone's having trouble with that kind of situation, the other way to think about it is, if you leave because you know that it's not healthy for you, you know, how do you know that he's not going to get help, or he's not going to make the changes that he needs to make, because he may have a wake up moment at that point,
Right.
helping him, by leaving. And sometimes, it's hard that way because oftentimes women still care about that person.
Of course.
So, but I think, like you said, Christina, we have to be the priority. Our self-care, our mental well-being, our emotional well-being has to be the priority, because we're really not good to anyone else if we can't take care of ourselves first. So that
Yeah.
needs to be.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last question because I love the concept of hashtag she wins. So if you are struggling with domestic abuse and you're not sure what to do, this is such a great book to pick up, because you're going to hear from survivors, people that have already been through this, and you can probably relate to a lot of the ways that they're feeling right now. You're probably going to see your story in their story and find strength in that. But I also want to ask you really quickly about Killing Kate. What's that book about? Can you give us a little kind of synopsis of who you worked with and what that book is about?
Yes, I'd love to. Killing Kate is a story. So I need to give you like a little bit. I'll quickly do a little bit of
Sure.
backstory happens, but I went to Virginia to interview Kate for hashtag She Wins, and in talking with her, I just felt that her story was so significant that I related to it in so many ways, even though it was very different from mine. A lot of the, like the control, the domination, the manipulation was very similar. And so she was actually shot twice by her ex-husband, and her father was as well. They were in the same apartment. And this was also a 4-year-old son who was right there. And so, when she was telling me her story and I was photographing her for the book, I just felt so compelled to ask her if I could help her write her story, because I just really resonated with it. And she said, okay, I'll think about it, and I was in my Uber on the way back to the airport, and she texted me and she's like, can we set up a phone call next week to talk about this? And so I was very excited. I'm honored to help her tell her story. I think there's important pieces, because we're similar in age, Kate and I. And so there's a lot that we explored, about like going back to, what we knew as teenagers, growing up, about, what we didn't know about relationships. And we just have a really strong connection, the two of us do. And it was such a joy to help her write her story. It, reads like a horror thriller.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine that real life. Like, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's quite a journey. In fact, both books have been out for, She Wins has been out for year. And then Killing Kate will be out for a year in October. And that sold out on Amazon the first day that it was available. And so, yeah, we've had a lot of fun with that, getting to, like share her story and all of the important pieces in it, the warning signs and everything. And I think that, women being able to share their stories, even though it's uncomfortable, and even though, there's a lot that a lot of feelings involved, because a lot of times, different emotions come up, or you kind of go back to, all of the things that maybe you wish that would, have been different. And
Sure.
but I think that by more women telling their stories, and we make it a conversation in society that can be talked about more fluidly, easily, I think that's where, the change is. And it inspires other women to be able to talk about it, to be able to get help, and to be able to move beyond, their circumstances to a more fulfilling life.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for taking your situation and turning it into something that will inspire so many others and help so many other women who are in the same position as you find the strength to get out of it. Will find the strength to share with other women that they know are going through that. Like, just you, by having a voice, will impact thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, over your lifetime. And I think that that's very incredible. So thank you for having the courage, Alisa, to not only write about your story and get it on paper. That's even scarier, right? Now it's published and it's on paper. But I think you are making such a huge difference in this world. And so I really appreciate your time today and being here and sharing your story, and sharing how you're helping other people along the way.
Christina, thank you. Those are really heartfelt words, and I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me. Thanks for talking today. And I just am really grateful to you.
Well, you're welcome. It was really great to connect, and maybe we'll do this again soon. If you've got another book coming out, maybe we'll do this again soon.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, bye for now.
All right. Bye bye.